Hello and welcome, I'm Totalxclipse, and after 7,000 hours playing Satisfactory, I feel it's time for the ultimate Satisfactory starter guide. And this will be the prequel to our Perfect Factory series that will run alongside our 1.0 Let's Play. Now this video will cover everything that you need to know to get started in the game and set up the very basic automation that's covered in the tutorial. So we're talking iron, copper and limestone. Now I'm going to follow this up shortly with our first perfect starter factory that will get you off to the best start with efficient builds, and this time the series will be much more in depth, and I'll also be building it alongside you, so no creative mode this time, as a few of you mentioned, though you may see the occasional shots from above for a better understanding of the area. Now, as it is an in-depth starter tutorial, most people who've played Satisfactory will already know the information that we've covered here, so you may want to skip this, but I do appreciate all of you who stick around, and you may even see some new stuff specific to 1.0 a little later on. Now, of course, if you've a friend joining you playing Satisfactory for the first time, do pass this video over to them to bring them up to speed so that you can enjoy the game together. Now, I'm also going to be streaming 1.0's launch on twitch.tv/Totalxclipse and my More Total YouTube channel, so if you would like to ask me any questions directly, you can, or you can write in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond in good time. With that out of the way though, let's get started. Now, at its fundamentals, Satisfactory is a base building automation game. You'll harvest materials, process them into an item to be used in building, research, or later tier items, which you will send off to the space elevator to unlock more advanced tiers of production and construction. But we start off stranded in the starter biome of our choice. Now, it doesn't matter really which starting area you choose, though I do recommend for new players the grassy fields or the rocky desert, as the flat terrain makes it easy to learn the basics. All of these starting areas are parts of the same map, so if you particularly like the other areas, don't worry, we'll probably get round to them later for one of the more advanced factories. But in this, I'll be starting in the rocky desert. Now, I don't recommend skipping the onboarding tutorial, as it will keep us goal focused and stop us getting sidetracked or overwhelmed by choice. And it also has some lore associated with it that you may want to watch if you enjoy the narrative side of the game. Now, you can enable advanced settings, which will allow you to spawn items, activate no power or creative mode, and even fly. But I do recommend leaving this off for your first playthrough at least. So, we've landed on Massage 2 ABB. The first thing we need to do is follow the objectives in the top left. The game explains clearly how to do these onboarding objectives, so I won't really explain them. Once you've scanned for ore via the V button, you should receive pings as to the location of nearby ore. You can then see the ore deposit's distance from you in the compass, and if you're close, you should be able to see signatures radiating from them as well. Now, these ore nodes may be protected by hostile aliens. You can either kill them with your zapper, or if you prefer a combat-free game, go to the options, gameplay, and then select creature hostility to either passive or retaliation, where they will only attack you if you attack them first. Now that you've found an ore node, you can mine it by hand with E. The node may have an iron deposit on top of it. Now, I recommend starting by harvesting that. It's the rock on top which needs to be destroyed if you plan on using an automated miner on this node at a later date. From here, we can use the 20 gathered iron ore to build the hub base. To do so, open the build menu by pressing Q, and then select the hub in the specials tab. And don't worry too much about where you place this for now, as we can move it later. Now, from here we can access the hub terminal. This is where our main factory unlocks will be located, and by fulfilling the order in the milestone such as hub tier 1 here, we can unlock the shown rewards at the cost of the order, which for this is 10 iron rods. Located behind us when facing the terminal is a crafting bench. This allows us to manually turn the iron ore into iron ingots, and from there we can produce iron plates or rods. Just click the item that you want to produce, and if you have the required resources, click the spacebar once to continue producing the amount needed. No need to hold down the spacebar or the mouse button. Now for now we will fulfill the first 2 orders. You may need to collect more iron ore to do this though. Now the third hub tier requires copper. This is a new ore and we can scan this similarly to the iron by holding down V. But before heading out there, you'll want to build an equipment workshop. Find it by opening the build menu, press Q, then heading to the special tab. We can then rotate the buildables with the mouse wheel, then left click to build. In here we can build the portable miner, also known as the portobello miner. You may see that, it's a little Easter egg in the game. This can be placed on nodes to harvest resources for us. Now I recommend placing one on the iron node and one on the copper node to get started, though you can place multiple should you wish. The purity of the node that it's on though dictates the speed the ore is harvested. Now there are 3 purities of node to be aware of. There's the impure, the normal node, and pure, each yielding different amounts of resources. After harvesting copper ore, we can turn it into copper ingots similarly to the iron, then onto wire. But before we get too dependent on handcrafting, let's talk automation. Each resource can be processed automatically, providing you have the required building, inputs and power. Now at this stage we can turn base ores like iron and copper into ingots using a smelter, and then into their desired components using a constructor, but we do need power for this. Now on the back of the hub we do have a biomass generator. Eventually we will have 2, but at this stage we just have 1. Now these are smaller than the dedicated automatic biomass generators, but they will do for now. Collect foliage on the floor by pressing E when looking at a bush or dead wood on the floor, and you can actually hold E if you're in a densely populated area of foliage after looking at a single piece, and that will allow you to collect everything as you're running around to save you from spamming the E key. But now that you've collected a load of foliage, we can burn them in the generator. Now wood burns slower than leaves, indicated by the 12 wood consumed per minute, versus the leaves, which is at 80 per minute. So the wood is more efficient at running the generator. However, these can be turned into biomass and even solid biofuel, which is even more efficient. Now the biomass generators only consume electricity when connected to a power grid, which is drawing energy. So as you can see, currently it's not running. Next, let's place a smelter. This requires wire to build, but we'll also need some cable as well. So we're going to have to produce that manually. At this point, build the smelter from the production menu and connect it with a wire. We can do this from the build menu, but if you look at the hotbar in the lower center of the screen, we can press the number 2 to automatically select the cable build piece, skipping us going through the build menu. From here we can connect the smelter to the generator, and note that the generator is running but not consuming any resource. This is because the smelter isn't running. Next we'll press E on the smelter and select the copper ingot recipe, and from here we can drag the copper ore that we have in our inventory to the input buffer, or failing that you can in these screens just shift left click to get the ore to go to the input from your inventory. With the smelter now running, we can see that the generator is using fuel, and we're going to use this copper that we're producing at the moment to complete hub 3. If your inventory at this point is full of random materials, we can also use the hub's storage box to store resources until later on. Now unlocking hub 3 unlocks constructors and the ability to expand our power network through power poles. And at this stage we also get some hub lights in the hub, and speaking of those lights, if it is nighttime for you, you can turn the flashlight on by using the key B on your keyboard. Now you'll need concrete at this point. This can be produced from limestone, and this is a new resource similar to iron and copper that has now been unlocked in your scanner. So at this point, we're going to build another portable drone miner and collect the limestone, then turn that into concrete so we can start focusing on things like power poles. Now we can build a power pole thanks to that concrete, and the power pole gives us the ability to use multiple power connections, allowing us to chain networks together between production buildings and the generators that we have, as each of those types of buildings only has a single power point. At this point, you need to delete the cable between the smelter and the generator. Now to do this, just press F. This opens the delete tool, and then you're going to hold left click. Now in Satisfactory, all build resources are refunded when an item is deleted, so don't worry about placing things in the wrong position. At this point, we can now connect the generator to a power pole, and you'll notice the power pole has 4 power point slots available, allowing you to connect the smelter, the generator, and well, even another smelter at this point, and we'll still have 1 extra slot to connect to, say, another power pole and expand the power network further or spread it further. But this does mean that all buildables within that network are going to share the same power grid, and if you consume more power than is provided by the system, it will shut down like this. Now in this case, we just ran out of fuel, but it's important to bear that in mind. So you must make sure that you're providing enough capacity for your network to run. Next, let's have a look at the constructors. Now the constructors turn the ingots provided by smelters, as well as other raw resources like limestone, into their next component piece. And they can also be used to turn processed items like iron rods into another item, such as screws. Now these are screws, and we don't like them. Unfortunately, to build a constructor, we need reinforced iron plates. This is the first item that requires 2 resources to build. So to automate this item, we'll need an assembler, but that's for the next video. For us, we're going to have to combine iron plates with screws in order to build these in the crafting bench. So once you have some reinforced iron plates, we'll build our first constructor. You can find it in the same tab as the smelter, the production section of the build menu. And whilst you have the hologram out, you can hold Control to snap the constructor in line with the smelter. And this is displayed by these dotted lines that you can see here. The green dotted line is the output, and the red dotted line signifies the input. So that's new for 1.0. You can also snap a hologram in place by pressing H, but don't worry about that just yet. And from here, we can connect it to the grid. I'll produce the wire, taking the copper ingots from the smelter behind it, and then in front of our wire constructor, I'm going to place another constructor, and this is going to turn the wire that we've just produced into cable. However, we are missing one important piece of the puzzle at this point in order to automate this process that you can see here, and that's conveyor belts. So using this process, set up a smelter for iron ingots and then a constructor for iron plates. This will max your power capacity, so you'll then need to produce the 10 concrete manually in order for us to finish hub 4. Once you've done that, you will unlock conveyor belts, and these allow us to automate the whole process that we've just talked about, bar the miner, which will come shortly. Now, if you've made it this far, there's now player customization in Satisfactory, so you can head into the hub and you can change your helmet, accessories, and player color. You can even find other helmets in the wild to customize your character further. Now let's connect the smelter and constructors with the conveyors. We can grab the conveyor by pressing 3 on the hotbar, or grabbing it in the build menu. You can also change what number value it's associated with on the hotbar by hovering over the build icon in the build menu and then clicking the number that you'd like it to be in the hotbar. Now to connect the conveyors, click the conveyor on the smelter and then click the conveyor again on the constructor. 1.0 has made belt snapping super easy, and from here you can see the first segment is running. Do this for the second constructor and voila. At this point we need you to gather the resources required for hub 4, and at that point we can advance to hub phase 5. In hub 5 we unlock the Mark 1 miner. There's also the storage containers unlocked and the second biomass generator on the hub. First we'll connect the biomass generator to the current network by connecting it to a power pole, ideally the one that's connected to the other generator, and this allows us to run 2 generators at once, providing us with a power capacity of 40 megawatts, allowing us to expand our factory further. And from here we'll place the miners. These need to be placed on an ore node and require a portable miner, and if you remember rightly, you need to remove the deposit on top of the node before you can build this. At this point we can place down the miner, and again, depending on the node purity, the miner will yield more or less resources. This node is pure and produces 120 ore per minute, whereas the copper node is impure and this provides us with 30 ore per minute, but it will do for now. Here we're going to run the iron ore miner via conveyor into the smelter, and from there the smelter will run into the constructor producing the iron rods, and then after this we should place a container and run a conveyor into this. This allows us to store a larger amount of items as the constructor has a max hold of 1 slot of that particular item, which you can see here is the case with the cable constructor. As the output is a full stack, the constructor is now running idle. It cannot fill that stack any further. So until we get rid of it, it's not going to run. This is why providing a storage unit allows you to hold more resources and thus allows your factory to run for longer. Now currently we are limited to 40 megawatts of power capacity. As such, we can only run a few production lines. So I recommend setting up a limestone miner and constructor producing concrete and storing it. This is going to be really important for building materials later on. When doing this, you can change the orientation of the belts whilst placing them by using the mouse wheel, but the new straight build mode makes turns automatic. To do this, you need to hold R whilst you have the conveyor item selected and then go hover over the straight option. Failing that, you can just press R and it will swap between the 2 different modes. Now I also recommend building a copper miner, and from here you want to have a smelter and a wire constructor, and then just to go over the iron section, we want an iron miner, a smelter and 2 constructors in total. The first one's connected to the smelter for the iron rods, and then the other one will be for the iron plates. You may have just noticed though that I copied the constructor just by looking at the other one, and the way that you can do this is by pressing the middle mouse button whilst looking at a buildable. If we look in the rod constructor, we can see at this point that it's consuming 15 iron ingots per minute, but the smelter has an output of 30 iron ingots. So as the input buffer fills on the iron rod constructor, we can actually place that excess in the iron plate constructor. Now we will have to do this manually until we lock splitters, but it'll ensure you're working towards the hub 6 goal and storing important items for building. And once you've done this build, it will in total run at a maximum capacity of 40 megawatts. So to expand on this, we will have to add more power generators, which I believe are unlocked in the next tier. Currently, the copper node that we're using is quite far away. As such, we have 2 options. Once we run the power to the miner via the power pole, we can either rebuild the copper factory there, or we can belt the copper all the way to our factory here. Now the former is less expensive for the materials as you won't be running large conveyor lines, but will be time consuming for us walking back and forth between the storage units. Whereas the latter will be expensive in iron plates, but will actually save us from running between factories. So for me, I'm going to opt for sending the resources back to our hub area. But in the next episode, we're going to be rebuilding all of this anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much. It's just always a good idea to have all of your storage in the same area so that you can easily go back and grab items without having to run all over your factory. Oh, and in case you've noticed me sliding and jumping, the reason why we do this slide and jump is because it is quicker than just running in the game. Don't know why it hasn't been changed, but it's still the case. Now at this point, you're ready to unlock the next tier and hopefully understand the fundamentals of Satisfactory. And with this, you can now begin to build larger and more advanced factories working towards the first space elevator tier, which by fulfilling its orders in the space elevator, you will unlock more advanced tiers in the hub with new technologies and production buildings to really wrap your head around, and eventually go on to things like oil and, well, matter as of 1.0. Now don't worry, we are going to work on the perfect starter factory for our next episode in this series, where we're going to be covering basic power, efficient lines for all the basic resources, and basic factory design. So it's going to be everything that's needed to really kickstart your journey. Now I do hope you found this in-depth breakdown really easy to understand. If so, please do hit the thumbs up. And again, if you do have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, or join me on stream for some 1.0 fun and various factory game inspired giveaways. The links are in the description below. Now, as always, special thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon, notably our Solo Eclipse patron Firefless, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is the Saltran Husky. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.